Yeah, he's a NFL analyst. He's a broadcaster, podcaster,
Yeah.
all-around good guy. Not a runner for agents, Mr. Chris Spielman. You failed at that career. You had one shot
miserably,
at it.
miserably failed.
Didn't make it work, but the podcasting thing is going well, and it's nice to see you on a President's Day Monday morning. Kids have no school today, but hey, we soldier on. We do our thing.
Well, we work holidays,
yes,
apparently.
Maybe John Beeline won't be working holidays or any day soon. We'll get to the future of the Cavs coach, however tenuous it may be. Browns news with Myles Garrett, Mike Tomlin, Mason Rudolph, all kinds of other things going on. Buckeye basketball win on Saturday. I'm resigned to the fact that we're not going to have beautiful basketball, high-scoring basketball, fluid basketball like we had early in the year. It's just not going to happen from this point on.
Well, actually, when you look at that game, Kyle Young was big, right?
He was. Maslin Jackson. Shout out, Jackson.
Whenever you have, I think, a bunch of role players, and you don't know what role player is going to lead, and there's no consistent scoring. I don't think Caleb Wesson is the consistent player that they thought he would be.
Nope.
One good sign, and we haven't seen it all year, excuse me, but we did see when Luther Muhammad hit 3 threes, so that helps a little bit.
Shot looks like it's coming around for Luther. That's good.
And credit to Chris Holtman for being patient with Luther and never, telling him not to shoot the ball. I mean, he's going to shoot it, and he's not hesitant, and I admire that in a player. And hopefully if that continues to grow and he can then become at least a threat at scoring, that's only going to help this team. But there's not a consistent guy that you can go to night in and night out knowing that you're going to get 16 and 10. Ain't going to happen.
No.
It's just not going to happen. It's just not what it is. And so, but they win. And if they're winning ugly, then they're winning ugly. And that you said it last week that this is an important stretch of games.
Got to win your home games.
Coming up for Ohio State, and they've been able to answer. So hopefully they'll keep that going and carry the momentum forward.
Yeah, Thursday at Iowa, and anything's possible.
Coach Fran.
Played crazy Fran McCaffrey.
Anybody
could get yelled at.
I still have not.
He's just a wild man, Fran McCaffrey. He said a very bad thing about an official last year. Remember that in the hallway of Value City Arena? He called him a cheating blank.
Yeah.
And they had to censure him. And Fran's apology was to Iowa, the Big Ten, but not to the ref. He wouldn't retract calling the ref a cheater and a vile name. So, he was the coach at Siena when they beat Ohio State in the NCAA tournament.
So goes back that far.
Crime against humanity.
I understand
my
now.
Forgiveness not extended yet, even though I hopefully have grown personally. Mike Tomlin and the Steelers don't look like they're inclined to forgive Myles Garrett's assertion that Mason Rudolph called him a racial slur, and they're certainly not going to forget it. Mason Rudolph tweeted after Myles Garrett doubled down on his claims following his reinstatement by the NFL. Mason Rudolph tweeted, 1,000% false, bold-faced lie. I did not, have not, and would not utter a racial slur. This is a disgusting and reckless attempt to assassinate my character. Mike Tomlin. Following up, I support Mason Rudolph, not only because I know him, but because I was on the field immediately following the altercation with Myles Garrett and subsequently after the game. I interacted with a lot of people in the Cleveland Browns organization, players and coaches. If Mason said what Myles claimed, it would have come out during the many interactions I had with those in the Browns organization in my conversations. I had a lot of expressions of sorrow for what transpired. I received no indication that anything racial or anything of that nature in those interactions.
And Mason Rudolph's agents are now threatening a defamation lawsuit against Myles Garrett. And I just think, if indeed true, and Mason Rudolph did say that, we would have heard about it right away. You cannot hide that.
No.
There's so many people that would have come out and said, well, he was spurred on because of the racial slur that he directed at Myles Garrett.
It would be reasonable to assume that the Steelers' offensive linemen, who I believe at least one of them was African American, would have heard it, and in that situation, would not have. I don't think would have denied that.
Well, that or all the defensive linemen, or all the people around that, or the officials, or the microphones of the officials, or the tapes, or whatever recording device which the NFL said they investigated. And so when you slap that on somebody, I don't think people understand the ramifications if that if you're falsely accusing somebody of that without 100% proof, I mean, you're going to label a guy that shouldn't be labeled for something that he is not. And I can think of nothing more horrible than to be defined as a racist. And so, I mean, if he's sticking to that story, then if I'm Mason Rudolph, then I seriously have to defend myself on that. And Mason Rudolph seems to have the evidence against him. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why Myles Garrett, first of all, did a sit down interview.
Yeah.
Second of all, I
Bad
don't
idea.
understand why he's saying that when he didn't say it right after the game, because you think that would be the time to say it if you're going to say something like that. Well,
And Myles Garrett did interview immediately after the game. He was quoted after the game about the incident, and it wasn't like, they shuttled him away and he wasn't available to the press. He did interviews immediately after the game and never brought it up.
well, I mean, and it's so quick in our society today to automatically put a label on somebody. Well, you're homophobic, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a Zionist, you're a whateverist.
Yeah.
And I think it loses, in my opinion, when you continually try to label people and constantly call somebody something. It loses its effectiveness, and it has a direct opposite effect than which it should have if something like that truly happened.
Well, my perspective on it will probably not mesh with everyone's perspective on it. I don't believe words always justify actions. That word's a terrible word.
I'm not saying that
No.
swinging a helmet would justify that.
No,
action.
I'm just saying that I think we have to get away in society from the idea that words justify all actions. Words are words. Words are words. My perspective on this is if a word offends you, you've empowered the other person to offend you with their words. They can only offend you if you allow them to offend you. You're allowing them to define you. A word like that used by anyone says far more about the person using the word than it does about the person to whom the word is directed. Whatever the word is, whatever the slur is, it says more about the person using it as an accusation than it does of the person that it's aimed at if the person never used it. So
well, actually,
Myles Garrett, this was over. This was over
And now
when
it's just
he
gonna
was
be-
reinstated. And he has chosen to bring it back up. The Browns allowed him to bring it back up in his interview with ESPN, which they either should have known about or did know about and allowed. It's a terrible decision by Myles Garrett and by the Browns to bring this back up. It serves no useful purpose. And that's my view of it.
Well, that's
just my view.
I mean, I like your point, and I just want to kind of continue with that because I've used that with my kids, and I used it on myself when I was younger. Again, as we get older and go through life experiences, we tend to get smarter once we think about things. At least I did, and still continue to grow. But I always tell them if they're in a fight with one of their friends or somebody says something about them at school or whatever the case, from the time they were younger, I said, why would you give that person that much control over your life?
Yeah.
Why does that person get to control your feelings? Why does that person get to control how you feel that day or what you think about that night? Why are you giving them that much power? They don't have that right. And you're allowing them to do that. And so that's just to build on your point. But again, I think Mason Rudolph is defiant in his defiance of that. And when you have your coach come out and claim he didn't hear it, nobody said anything after the game. Nobody said anything for a couple days after that. Then all of a sudden it comes out that Mason Rudolph is a racist. I don't get it. I really don't. And I'm quite confident from being in those situations and hearing vile words used, and I probably used some words that I probably wouldn't use or called people names that I wouldn't call people names. Nothing racist, just more slang cuss words.
Yeah, or threats or idle
or
threats
more
or anything gets said on the field.
Yeah, more friend stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever used a racist word. In fact, I know I have not used a racist word. But when you label something like that, or something happens in the heat of the moment, a lot of things are said. But I can guarantee you, if there was a racial slur said, that would have been reported immediately. Even way back when I played, it would have been reported immediately.
I find the timing of it implausible, not just in this sense that, it wasn't stated immediately afterward. I find it implausible as it relates to Mason Rudolph, who played college football. He's a quarterback, certainly not the first time he's ever been sacked in an emotional game. He played at Oklahoma State, so he played against Oklahoma. It's implausible to me that Mason Rudolph could play that much football in that many pressure environments in a fairly common situation where a quarterback is sacked, and this would be the first time he ever said anything like this, that anyone heard it. I find that implausible. And so, again, this is not a productive conversation for Myles Garrett to engage in for his own benefit, for the Browns' benefit, for the NFL's benefit, and it's regrettable that this is still a topic, and it will remain a topic when the Browns and Steelers play again.
And especially if Mason Rudolph brings it again, or brings it to court, then it gets all up there, and what's that bring to the Cleveland Browns locker room? More distractions.
More distractions.
More distractions. Yeah. And that's not what they need, and they just can't get out of their own way, and I don't understand why they can't get out of their own way. I really have a hard time after paying attention, because usually I just would not pay attention to this stuff, unlike most Browns fans. It just fascinates me to watch these people step on a rake.
Well, I have a theory, but I'm not sure the fix applies in all cases. My theory is things continue to happen in any avenue of life because when they happen, there's no consequences for them happening. And, now you're not going to cut Myles Garrett. You're not going to cut Baker Mayfield. You're not going to cut the problem when you really have a problem. And this works both ways. We always talk about, with great organizations, what's great about the Saints? The Drew Brees is their hardest worker. What's great about the Patriots? Tom Brady's their hardest worker. Peyton Manning was the hardest worker on the Colts. When your best players are the most heavily invested, set the best example, good things happen. Same in your organization, same at, wherever you are. When your leaders demonstrate that they care about the final result, that's a good thing. Conversely, when your best players who are quote unquote above the kinds of consequences that would befall a free agent running back who's going to get cut if he fumbles, when those guys are the guys bringing distraction to the table, you got a real problem in your organization.
One exception. I think you can look at Antonio Brown, who had a lot of chances, but the Steelers let him go.
Eventually, yeah. Eventually, they even got too much for them, yeah.
I mean, and the Steelers basically stole from the Raiders. The Raiders didn't put up with it. Credit to the Raiders, right?
Right.
With Mike Mayock and John Gruden, enough's enough. They let him go.
Yeah, before he ever played a game. This would be a good time to probably read our review of the day, and you can review us on iTunes, and it helps us a lot, and we read them all, whether they're complimentary or not, as proof. This review comes from Begerson, who says, I normally rate the show a 5, but Bruce holding himself up as some sort of beacon of sports talk integrity, I would be fired if I was in Cleveland now, is a little ridiculous because you would talk about salacious gossip and others aren't right now. Come on. I don't disagree that Baker Mayfield needs to grow up, but your self-aggrandizing is just a bit much. You're basically attacking others' integrity. And that's in reference to me saying that I'm astounded that Cleveland talk radio, not just sports talk radio, but talk radio, because Baker's a topic across all genres, they're not discussing his judgment and his maturity, in my opinion, what is reflected by these reports of him being active on Snapchat and having liaisons with young women. Yeah, I was probably a little dramatic saying I'd be fired right now, but, I am a guy who has been fired for talking about something that management didn't want me to talk about because they had a contract. And I just, look, for right or wrong, I've always felt like my first responsibility was to the listener, or basically to the ideals of fairness and doing my job the right way. And I'm I guess comfortable with letting the chips fall where they may. It cost me my job at 97.1, which was okay. I ended up, I laughed in the wilderness in Cleveland for 5 years, but that was a great experience. I left Cleveland on my own volition because we had a better opportunity at the Zone. And the Zone opportunity ended because of finances, not related to me, not related to you, just related to the station. But yeah, I mean, that was overly dramatic to say I would have been fired. I don't know what I would have done if they had said,
That's not true, though.
Absolutely, positively, don't talk about this. That was what I was told on the Trestle thing years ago at the Fan, and I chose to try to talk about it in a way that could be,
But you can't do that.
Well, they just said, be careful. Don't blow him. Don't make him look bad. We've got an $11 million contract with the university,
Right?
and I'm just like, look, if you don't want me to go on the air today, and talk about this, then don't let me go on the air today. Because I can't go on the air today and have any credibility if I go out there and talk about something other than, that press conference at Ohio State where Gordon Gee said, I just hope the coach doesn't fire me. I just couldn't do that. Good conscience. And that's okay. Hopefully that fence has been mended. I got nothing against the Fan, nothing against the people at the Fan. I understand why they made their decision, and I think they understand why I made my decision. And it's okay. But I think in this case, it's a fair topic. That's just my argument.
Well,
it's a fair topic. That's the argument I make to my bosses.
And I believe both those radio stations, at least both the sports talk stations, are in negotiations for radio rights for the Cleveland Brown games. And so it's not unfathomable to believe that the bosses from those radio stations said, don't blow this. You can't talk about this because we have a lot of money on the line. Now, that's not like that we can't nobody would ever possibly jeopardize the integrity of truth-telling on a radio, especially when there's millions of dollars. I mean, we're naive to think that's the case. And our whole point wasn't to make a judgment morally on Baker Mayfield and what he does and what he doesn't decide to do. I think we were coming from the angle of, the judgment thing. And if this is something that has happened, we don't know if it's happened or not. It doesn't matter if it happened or not. It keeps getting into the news. When it keeps getting into the news, then it keeps becoming a distraction. And the other thing is, you look at, we were trying to look at it from Jimmy Haslam, Andrew Barry, and Kevin Stefanski's point of view. Okay, what if this leads to troubles at home? These are all the questions that you have to ask.
You have to ask every question.
As a person in power that's responsible for $1 billion business.
Yeah, he's the face of the franchise. The Browns can't succeed unless he succeeds. And I said on the blog that I wrote about this at SpielmanandHooley.com, none of us knew when Tiger crashed his SUV how deep that would go, or that he'd go 10 years without a major. 10 years. Mm-hmm. So if this affects Baker Mayfield on the field because of whatever tentacle this may have, a jealous boyfriend, divided mind. I mean, this liaison that the girl was willing to go in, put her name and face to for a half an hour on radio, happened during training camp. That is, in my opinion, a reflection of bad judgment. I want my quarterback to have good judgment.
Here's another thing that people don't think about, and I know because I've around this business most of my adult life, from the time I've been 22 up until now. So I've been around this business for 32 years. I've talked to owners, I've talked to management, I've talked to coaches, I've talked to players. And when an incident like this happens, there is a quote-unquote war room or strategic room, or teams actually hire crisis management companies to come in and say, how do we deal with this?
Yeah, they do.
And that's what
they don't often do it right, but they do it.
Well, and the other concern is, okay, I mean, the NFL is so concerned about one thing, and they're kind of lightening up now, and they're more open about it, but it was gambling, right?
Yeah.
If you walked into an NFL locker room, you covered the Miami Dolphins back when I was in my early part of my career. You walked into an NFL locker room, and you saw one sign and one sign only. There was no drugs, no alcohol, no nothing. There was only one big giant sign about gambling.
Yes. Same in Major League Baseball locker.
And so, so I would look at, if I were Jimmy Haslam, and I'm not making a moral judgment. I don't know. I said, well, what if somebody tries to blackmail
That
Baker
is something
Mayfield?
you have to consider
These
if you're
are
the
all
Browns.
the
What could
things-
this lead to?
These are all things that have to be considered, or you're not doing your job
That's right.
as a general manager of a football team, or as a chief strategy officer, or the owner, or the head coach. You have to be concerned of where this can lead, and it's negligence upon, in my opinion. It's negligence for those people not to do their job and look under every rock and find out what is and what is not true.
Yeah, and we don't know that they haven't. In fact, I'd be stunned even if the
They
Browns
have to
haven't.
do that, yeah.
But this isn't just in response to the reviewer. That is why I will acknowledge I may have over dramatically stated it.
Though.
Well, anyway, my point is that's why I believe it's a fair topic. And that's what I would have argued to any superior that I would have had at the time. Now, from a spiritual standpoint, now when you're on a job and they tell you don't do it, what about like my responsibility as being obedient and submissive to authority? Because that is something I would try to, if I were working in Cleveland still and you were here, I would call you. I would have said, what should I do? Because you live with me through the fan thing, and I respect your opinion on everything, particularly, obviously, football matters, spiritual matters, family matters. You're a confidant and a guy I'm accountable to. I would call you and I would say, Chris, they're telling me no. My integrity tells me, my responsibility to the listener, I think my integrity is at question. If I go on and I don't do it, how would I handle it from an obedience standpoint?
What do you think I would say?
I don't know. I honestly don't, because I'm conflicted on it. So I'm seeking your wisdom.
I would say this. You're going to make the decision. I'm going to give you information on what I think. I think that you have a responsibility to bring a paycheck into your family. If there's a way and they're telling you, don't talk about this because this can hurt the quote-unquote team.
Yeah.
This can hurt the quote-unquote company. Then you have to find a way, in my opinion, not to talk about it. If I'm at Fox and Fox tells me, hey, stay away from race, politics, and religion at all costs in your broadcast. Even though there's something that I need to say, I have to honor what people that give me a paycheck and that trust me to do their job and represent them to do the job that they ask me to do. So that's what I would tell you.
That'd be a hard one. I'm glad we have this format where we can't get fired.
Yeah. Well,
we can fire ourselves. That's about it.
Who would want to leave this?
Yeah, exactly. All this glory. You might ask the same question about John Beeline of the Cavs. Who would want to leave that fun party? They have the worst record in the East. Reports today from Sam Amico of SI.com and others that Beeline's meeting with Kobe Altman today. He's in the first year of a 5-year contract. He's 67 years old, highly successful in college, great college coach, great job at Michigan. And that John Beeline West Virginia, yeah, and he may be just at the end of his rope. Players have been all kinds of reports this year of unrest, and the players don't respect him, and that's the challenge that you have when you go into the NBA as a coach and you A, didn't play in the NBA, and B, haven't grown up in the NBA culture being an assistant coach. And there are a lot of coaches in the NBA who didn't play, but they've always coached in the NBA and come up. And the NBA players are pretty provincial about that. It's like, your college ways, blah, blah, blah. So Beeline, who knows basketball, there's no question, but these guys just aren't responding to him. And
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It was a bad hire from the get-go. I thought it was a bad hire from the get-go. I don't think I'm with you. Brad Stevens, for example, from the Miami Heat, was a guy that...
Well, he's at the Celtics. Brad Stevens.
No, or who was the kid at the Miami?
Eric Spoelstra.
Eric Spoelstra, and then those guys. I know Eric didn't grow up. He grew. Some of these guys have come from being, scouts and but they know the culture. They know how to handle the culture. They know how to relate to the players, and they know how to get the most out of the players. John Beeline comes from in a background where there's one voice and one voice only, and that's his voice.
Yep.
And when you forfeit that when you go to the NBA. We know that the most successful NBA coaches, in my opinion, know how to handle huge personalities. The classic example would have been Spoelstra, right?
Yep. And he had Pat Riley's backing. That's
Yeah.
why he was able to do it.
Okay, and so Pat Riley certainly had to respect the players as a former player and a coach. What about the guy who was coaching the Cavs when the Cavs won it all?
Ty Lue.
Ty Lue.
Ty
Now,
Lue
Ty
played-
played a little bit.
Ty played. They respect Ty Lue as a player.
But
Yeah.
what Ty Lue do?
He'd been a career assistant.
But he deferred a
But he-
lot of
he
things.
deferred a lot of things,
and even in the huddle, he deferred things. And you thought I was joking, and I wasn't joking when LeBron James was
Coach of the team.
I mean,
He had right of first refusal.
yes, he did.
Yeah.
Now,
But look,
now-
Ty Lue got in his face in the finals at halftime and said, I need more from you. So Ty Lue did pick his spots. But that's the deal, is LeBron would accept it coming from him because Ty Lue played in the league. He wouldn't accept it from a David Blatt. He never accepted it, even though Paul Silas was a great NBA player. He never accepted it early in his career from
Right.
Paul Silas or Byron Scott, who also is a great player. So it's look, man, when the players
just
are
a
making
bad
when the
hire.
players are making $40 million, it's really hard to
That's like-
walk that tightrope.
It's like Izzo. Like I remember when Tom Izzo was
Wouldn't work.
He couldn't last. Rick Pitino didn't last.
Right.
in
John
the NBA.
Calipari didn't last.
No, because those guys are alpha personalities, and they can't go and sit down and be quiet. Or if somebody tells them no, we're going to do it this, or he's telling somebody, work the ball inside, and he takes an unadvised three. What are you going to do? You can't take him out. If you take him out, he's not. It's your star player. They run the show. We all know that.
And we've seen that this year with Kevin Love, and the Cavs are a curious mix. They've got these two young guards, and then they got bigs with Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson. They trade for another big and Andre Drummond. I mean, they're just a mess. So I feel bad for Beeline because he's a really good coach. If he's 68, are college programs going after him like crazy?
I think he would. Yeah, it depends on the energy and all that.
I think he'd be a great hire for somebody.
It's just
give me 5 good years.
There's such a difference between NFL coaches and college coaches, even in football and in basketball. The difference is amazing.
Remember what Kerry Combs said the other day? He was at Ohio State, and he said, college and high school, I'd tell them, go do this. And they'd pretty much go do it. He said, NFL, go do this. Why?
Yeah.
And you have to be able to explain it.
If you don't have a reason, you can't. You don't have any credibility, especially if you didn't play.
And that's not to say John Beeline can't explain it. I'm sure he can. I'm sure he just has. I think they doubted John Beeline because who's this old college coach coming in here?
Yeah.
Who is he to tell me what to do?
I was speaking from a football point of view
Yeah.
before you jumped in, but anyway. What is that with you these nowadays? I don't understand.
I'm an idiot.
Oh, I don't.
No, I am. It's a bad habit. Horrible habit.
Do you do that when you have a conversation with
No.
Sherry?
Try not to.
Yeah.
That's why I save it all for you. You're the lucky recipient of my bad habit.
I was just going to say Frank Gans, who never played a down in the NFL, but he would tell, I'm telling you why, and we wouldn't have to ask why. He would say, I'm going to confirm validity. I'm going to tell you why this is valid. Then I'm going to show you on film why this is valid, and this is why we're going to do it this way. And if you're not going to do it this way, we're going to go up to the head coach, and we're going to sit there, and I'm going to raise my hand, and I'm saying, Coach, either fire me or cut him. So you make the decision which way you want to do it, and we'll see who lasts, and we'll see who walks out of that office door. And so everybody ended up doing what he was saying, not because of the threat, because he was able to show on film why we're going to do it this way.
I don't know if the Cavs don't listen to Beeline because I'm sure he's very articulate in explaining it to them. I just don't think they ever bought into his vision. So I feel bad for him. Wonder if he resigns if he gets the other 4 years on his deal, or if they have to fire him.
Be a settlement, probably.
Probably so, yeah. Email the show, SpielmanHooleyPodcast@gmail.com. SpielmanHooleyPodcast@gmail.com. BGW says he's from Ohio. I just listened to your podcast. Love how you incorporate sports through a spiritual lens. I enjoyed watching Spielman with the Buckeyes and Lions. I first heard Hooley on ESPN Cleveland right before you left. My favorite episode is when you turned the airwaves into a gospel presentation when Aaron Goldhammer asked about the differences between Judaism and Christianity. Anyway, I pray for your success and will be a regular listener. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. I don't remember that, but if they gave me an opening, I usually took it. So,
good for you.
Yeah, tried to.
Well, and I think it's important to, when we talk about these things, when you can turn it into